Chapter 1. The Hidden Door. The storm had begun hours before sundown, and by nightfall the city seemed swallowed by water. Rain drummed endlessly on the crooked rooftops, ran in rivulets along the gutters, and pooled in the cracked stones of the streets. The usual evening crowds had vanished, shutters barred, lanterns dimmed. Only the sound of the storm remained, accompanied now and then by the hollow rattle of a cart hurrying homeward. Through this deserted labyrinth of stone and rain hurried Elias Mora. He was thin, taller than most boys of 15, but carrying himself as though he wished to fold inward, to be unseen. His coat, too small for him, the sleeves ending well above his wrists, was plastered to his skin. Beneath it he clutched a stack of books, each page already warping with damp. Elias could hardly see where he was going. The rain stung his eyes and plastered his dark hair across his forehead. Still he pushed forward, his steps quick and restless. It was not simply the weather that unsettled him. For as long as he could remember, Elias had carried the uneasy certainty that something followed him. Not a person, not footsteps he could hear, but something else. A presence, faint and flickering, that slipped just out of sight whenever he turned. Teachers called him distracted. Children called him odd, a dreamer. But Elias knew. The world around him carried a second layer, invisible to others, yet insistent to him. Glimmers of light where no lamp burned, whispers where no lips moved, cold spots in the air on summer days. Tonight that presence pressed closer than ever. It tugged at him, insistent, guiding his steps deeper into streets he did not know. He slowed as the market square gave way to smaller lanes. The familiar lamps thinned until only scattered lanterns burned, their flames quivering in the downpour. He found himself in an alley so narrow he might have brushed both walls with outstretched hands. The air felt strange here, heavier, as though the storm outside had been muted. At the alley's end, half hidden in shadow, stood a door. It was crooked, as if forced into the space between two leaning brick houses. At first glance it looked like nothing, a forgotten cellar entrance perhaps. But when Elias stepped closer, he saw faint silver lines etched across the wood, glowing as though alive. The veins pulsed softly, like breath beneath skin. His heart slammed against his ribs. He should turn back. He should run. Yet he could not. The pull he had felt all his life was stronger here, a rope around his chest, drawing him nearer. Rain slid down his cheeks as he lifted a trembling hand. His fingers brushed the wood. Warmth jolted through him. Not the heat of fire, but the warmth of recognition. The silver veins flared bright. The door shuddered, groaned, and slowly creaked open. Light spilled into the alley. Not the harsh light of lamps, but a golden radiance, soft and steady. The air carried scents Elias had never known, yet instantly trusted. Parchment, firewood, herbs, candle wax. He froze. Every instinct screamed danger. But beneath that, deeper, was another voice, one that had whispered to him since childhood, though he had never understood it until now. This is what you've been waiting for. Books forgotten under his arm, Elias stepped across the threshold, and the world changed. The rain vanished, the alley dissolved. He stood in a vast hall whose ceiling soared higher than any cathedral. Hundreds of candles floated in the air, their flames swaying gently without smoke or wax to tether them. Long banners of crimson, sapphire, and emerald hung from the rafters, each stitched with strange sigils that shimmered faintly as though alive. The walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient books, their spines glinting in the candlelight. The floor beneath his feet was polished stone, so smooth it reflected the flicker of flames. At the far end of the hall stood a tall figure cloaked in green velvet. Her presence was commanding yet calm, like a storm held tightly in hand. When she turned, Elias saw her eyes. They glowed faintly, like starlight reflected in water. "Welcome, Elias Mora," she said. Her voice carried through the hall, resonant, certain, as if the stones themselves bent to listen. Elias stumbled back a step. How do you know my name?" The woman's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Because you were always meant to stand here. This is Astrafall Academy, a refuge for those touched by the unseen. Your ordinary life is over, child. Tonight, the truth begins." Elias clutched his damp books as though they might shield him. His chest rose and fell too fast. His mind whirled, filled with 100 questions, 1,000 fears. Yet above them all, one truth rang clear. He had always known he did not belong to the world outside, and now, at last, he had stepped into the one that had been waiting for him all along. Chapter 2. The First Dawn at Astrafall. Elias did not sleep that night. How could he? His mind reeled from the revelation, every thought spiraling into another. The great hall where he had first entered had faded into a smaller chamber after the cloaked woman's words. She had guided him there without explanation, the hem of her velvet robe whispering across the stone floor, and he had followed like a shadow. The room she left him in was simple compared to the grandeur of the hall, but it was still unlike anything he had known. A narrow bed with deep green covers stood against one wall, a desk carved with swirling runes against another. The single candle by his bedside burned without wick or wax. Its flame floated gently in midair, casting a steady glow. Elias lay in bed, with the blanket drawn up to his chin, staring at that impossible flame until dawn. When morning came, it did not arrive with the usual pale grey light he knew from the city. Instead, a golden warmth spread across the room, as though the sun itself had drawn closer. The candle vanished, leaving only the glow that poured through a window he hadn't noticed before, arched, high, and set with panes of glass that shimmered faintly with colors that shifted as he watched. A knock startled him. "Up already?" a voice called, cheerful, almost laughing. The door swung open before Elias could respond. A boy about his age stepped inside, carrying a satchel slung across his chest. His hair was the color of autumn leaves, wild and unruly, and his grin was quick, effortless. "You must be the new one," he said, eyeing Elias. "Mora, right? Elias Mora." Elias nodded slowly. "Thought so. I'm Corwin Veil," the boy continued, tossing his satchel onto Elias's desk as though it were his own. "Been here 3 years now. They told me to fetch you. Breakfast first, questions later. That's how it goes here." Before Elias could ask anything, Corwin pulled him from the bed, pressed a dry robe into his hands, dark green, embroidered faintly with silver, and all but shoved him into the corridor. The corridors themselves were alive. Elias swore the stone walls shifted subtly as they walked, the carvings rearranging when he wasn't looking. Windows looked out not only on the mountain range surrounding the academy, but sometimes on other, stranger vistas. Forests glowing with pale fireflies, seas churning under 3 moons, skies shot through with constellations he did not recognize. "Don't stare too long," Corwin advised, tugging him along. "They show you what they want. not always where you are. First years have been known to step through by accident and end up halfway across the realm. Elias blinked. The window can do that? Kalen grinned. Of course. Everything here does more than it seems. That's Astrafall. They emerged into the dining hall, and Elias nearly forgot how to breathe. The chamber stretched wider than the entire street he had grown up on, tables running its length. Above them floated an enchanted ceiling, but unlike the stone above his room, this one was open to the sky, or something like it. A dawn unlike any he had seen stretched above. Clouds in shades of gold and violet swirled slowly, alive, as though painted freshly each moment. The smell of bread, herbs, roasted meats, and fruit filled the air, mingling with laughter and the clatter of dishes. Hundreds of students crowded the tables, robes of varying colors marking different years or studies. Some were chatting eagerly, others practicing small tricks of magic with their hands. Sparks danced from fingertips, spoons stirred tea on their own, and once Elias thought he glimpsed a parchment fold itself into a bird and flutter across the room. It was overwhelming. Kalen shoved a plate into his hands and guided him to an empty spot at the edge of a table. Sit, eat. Trust me, you'll need it before lessons start. Elias tried. He nibbled at bread and fruit, but his eyes darted everywhere, unable to rest. The weight of the room pressed in. The sense of belonging all these students shared, the ease with which they handled the impossible. He felt the outsider more than ever, a thread out of place in a tapestry. Don't look so haunted, Kalen muttered around a mouthful of food. Everyone's lost their first day. You'll get used to it, eventually. Before Elias could reply, the room hushed. At the front of the hall, on a raised dais, stood the woman from last night. In daylight, her presence was no less commanding. She raised her hand, and silence swept the room like a tide. "Students," she said, her voice carrying to every corner, "welcome back to Astrafall Academy, and to those joining us for the first time, welcome home." Elias's heart stuttered. Home. Could this place, strange and vast as it was, truly become that? The woman continued, "Your paths will not be easy. The unseen world is vast, and it tests those who seek to walk it. But remember, you were chosen because you are already part of it. This is not where you begin, but where you continue." Her eyes swept the hall, and for the briefest instant they locked on Elias. The weight of that gaze rooted him to his seat. It was not judgment. It was recognition. Kalen nudged him under the table. "That's Headmistress Lysera. Don't let her stare scare you. She sees through everyone, but it's not as bad as it feels." Probably. The rest of breakfast blurred by. Students rose, tables emptied, and Kalen dragged Elias once more into the corridors, already chattering about schedules, professors, and tricks he claimed only older students knew. Yet Elias could hardly listen. His thoughts echoed with the headmistress's words, with the impossible sky, with the way the very stones seemed alive. Every step into Astrafall felt like a step deeper into a world both wondrous and treacherous. And though part of him longed to run, a stronger part whispered what he could no longer deny. He belonged here. Chapter 3. Lessons of Fire and Shadow. The bell that summoned first years to class was unlike any Elias had known. It did not clang from some tower or ring through corridors. Instead, the sound unfolded inside his chest, a low hum that grew until it thrummed in his bones. Kalen laughed when Elias startled, clutching his ribs. "You'll get used to that." Beats running late because you didn't hear a bell, doesn't it? Elias wasn't sure. They followed the stream of students down a wide spiral stairwell. The stones glowed faintly beneath their feet, lighting the way as though they remembered every step that had been taken across them. By the time they reached the classroom, Elias's stomach churned with nerves. The chamber was circular, with shelves of jars and vials lining the walls. Each was filled with strange substances, powders that shimmered like crushed stars, liquids that swirled in endless spirals, feathers that floated despite their glass prison. In the center stood a broad ring carved into the stone floor, its edges glowing faintly. The professor waited there. He was tall, his hair pale as frost, his eyes sharp as glass. His robes were black, stitched with threads of silver that caught the light as he moved. "First years," he said, voice cold and precise. "I am Professor Arvendrael. Here you will learn the shaping of raw magic. Not illusions, not parlor tricks. The true essence that lies beneath the world. You will not succeed easily. Most do not." His gaze swept over them, lingering on Elias. But those who endure become more than they imagined. Elias shifted uncomfortably. Professor Drael gestured to the glowing circle. "One by one, step inside. Call the spark that sleeps within you. Shape it if you can. Begin." The first student entered the circle, a girl with braided hair and steady eyes. She closed her hands, whispered under her breath, and a small flame blossomed between her palms. It wavered, then grew until it floated like a tiny sun. The class murmured, impressed. The next summoned a swirl of water, droplets spiraling in the air like dancing glass. Another coaxed vines from the cracks in the stone, green tendrils curling and stretching. Then it was Elias's turn. His legs felt heavy as he stepped into the circle. The air hummed faintly around him, vibrating against his skin. He closed his eyes, searching for whatever it was the others had found so easily. "The spark that sleeps within you," the professor had said. Elias had felt it before, in the whispers at the edge of hearing, the cold spots in summer air, the tug that had led him to the hidden door. He reached for it now, desperate. Something stirred. It rose like a tide, sudden and fierce, rushing through him too quickly to control. His breath caught. Heat licked his fingertips, then darkness, cold and suffocating, flooded in. His vision warped. Shadows rippled along the circle, climbing the walls, blotting out the jars and shelves. The air grew colder, each breath sharp as knives. Gasps echoed from the students. "Control it!" Professor Drael barked. His voice was the only anchor in the storm. "Do not let it master you." Elias tried. He grasped at the torrent, but it slipped from his hold, wild and unshaped. The shadows thickened, curling like smoke, and for an instant he thought he saw something move within them, eyes glinting, watching. Panic surged. He shoved the power away, as though tearing something loose from inside himself. The shadows shattered. The circle fell silent, empty once more. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping, sweat cold on his brow. The silence stretched. Finally, Professor Drael spoke. His expression was unreadable. Raw, untamed, dangerous, but not hopeless. He turned to the class. "Remember this. Power without control is ruin. Control without power is emptiness. You must find balance, or be destroyed by what you summon." Whispers rippled through the students as Elias staggered to his feet. He avoided their eyes, burning with shame. Kalen clapped him on the shoulder anyway, though his grin was strained. "Hey, not bad for a first try." At least you didn't set your robes on fire like I did." Elias forced a laugh, but the image of those shadowed eyes lingered. Later that evening, long after lessons ended, he wandered the corridor alone. The windows showed only the night sky, deep, endless, scattered with constellations. Yet in one pane, just for a moment, Elias swore he saw something else. A shape cloaked in darkness, watching him from beyond the glass. When he blinked, it was gone. But the unease remained, heavy as stone in his chest.